I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's panel, Lijo George. Lijo currently serves as the Vice President for CEAI, focusing his efforts on the annual conference education sessions, speaker selections, presenters, and chapter meetings, and has been a strong CEAI leadership support person since 2011. He works for Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago as an image-guided surgery specialist with 10 years of experience in the biomedical engineering technology field. Ladies and gentlemen, Lijo George.
Greetings to you. Before I get started, I just want to remind you all, can we all keep our phones silenced? And if you are talking that is not part of the panel, I ask that you would take a seat in the back or even outside of this room. We're going to get started. Welcome to CEAI 9th Annual Conference. It's been such an honor to have finest experts in the industry, which means Denise Lambert of TriMedics is here. We have G. Wayne Moore of Acertera Acoustic Laboratories, Steve Vanderzee of Advocate, and finally we have Bin-Seng Wang of WRP32 Management. Before we get started with the questions, I just want to give a little bit of brief introduction of what is the Right to Repair Act, what is happening. I just want to give a brief snapshot. Medical device service has become big business as healthcare delivery organizations look for ways to contain rising costs and original equipment manufacturer look for solutions to revenue and profitability changes. As a result, the global medical equipment maintenance market is expected to grow by 16.7% between 2015 and 2020. Backed by customer advocates, repair professionals, and other interested stockholders, the goal of the Right to Repair movement is passing legislation that would make it harder for manufacturers to keep repair information proprietary. Some manufacturers have resisted providing equipment manuals, training, service keys, schematics for other devices, taking the position that this information is proprietary and that service personnel from their organization know best how to undertake this work. A growing number of people, seeing this as an unreasonable state of affairs, are fighting back in a so-called right to repair movement. And I just want to emphasize before we get started, we need each other. It's not about them versus us. We'll begin by having each of the experts introduce themselves. Our goal is to spend an average of 5 minutes per questions, and I will choose 2 to 3 experts to answer each question. Is that all right? Say yes? All right, let's get started. Woo! Let's get started with Denise and rest of the group. Thank you for coming. Introduce yourself. Let's discuss. Let's talk.
Sure. My name is Denise Lambert, and I'm the Vice President of Quality and Regulatory Compliance with TriMedics.
Great. G. Wayne.
Wayne Moore. I'm the CEO of Acertera Acoustic Labs, and I'm also the current chair for the ultrasound section for MIDA/NEMA, and co-chair on the Output Standards Committee for AIUM, and I'm the bad guy here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Vanderzee. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Healthcare Technology Management for Advocate Aurora Health, and I'd say none of us are the bad guys today. We're all here to inform each other and continue the dialogue, I think, which is the most important part of today's discussion. I also want to give kudos to the entire CEAI leadership team. Another great conference. Kudos to the membership as well to continue supporting this. Been part of this from almost the very beginning, and it's exciting every year to come to these events and see the growth of the program and the contributions we're making, not only for the development of our HTM team members, but also the community and development of our future leaders. So thank you for all for being here today. It's yours.
Thank you. My name is Bin-Seng Wang. I'm responsible for quality and regulatory affairs for a manufacturer. Before you start asking, the answer is no, we don't provide service manuals. And the reason is very simple, because we make orthoses which are not repairable, and so it does not need any scheduled maintenance. Okay? All right, so I'm not the bad guy, I'm just the great guy. And also, just to give you a little background information, I have worked in almost all aspects of the industry, from research, manufacturing, design, production, equipment rental, equipment service, etc., including government authority, as well as education teaching. And so I am the proverbial jack of all trades and master of none. Okay, and if you don't believe me, come to my session later on. I'm going to prove that a lot of things are just nothing but fake news. Thank you.
All right. Woo! Great. My name is Lijo. I currently serve as the Vice President of CEAI, and very, very glad to serve in leadership. I got on to this leadership since 2010 in different roles, various roles. I started as a student, and by attending the chapter meeting, Al Moretti gave me the first job back in 2008 at Loyola Medical Center, and I really appreciate him for doing that. And ever since that, I've been serving as a web designer, web development. Then I got involved in being a treasurer for the organization. Then I got involved as a secretary for the organization. Then now I'm serving as the vice president. So glad to be here. Let's get started. And first question is, the primary argument used by manufacturers against the right to repair laws to refuse the release of maintenance information and the sale of replacement part is the concern about the safety of maintenance activities performed by non-manufacturers and unauthorized dealers, including hospital-based CE departments. Based on your experience, please rank the safety of service provided by the three industry segments: 1, manufacturer, in-house CE teams, and external third party, in descending order. A, safest; B, intermediate; C, least safe. I'd like to start with Wayne Moore, if possible.
No pressure.
I'm tempted to say that they're all. It depends. So I like to equivocate on this because it really does. Based on my experience, I've seen OEM service that wasn't exceptional, and I've seen in-house CE teams become creative with solutions that may or may not be in compliance with the FDA, and I've also seen external third parties do poor work. The opposite side's true as well. I've seen them all do great work, and there's kind of the conundrum in that the dialogue really shouldn't be about who can perform the safest work, but how should the work that they do provide how should it be controlled? How should it be regulated? How should it be verified across the board? And I think that, so I avoid this kind of a question because it really doesn't go to the issue. And the issue is, how do we verify and validate that what is being done is safe and efficacious across the board?
Awesome. We'll go over to Denise. You want to comment?
Well, I'm glad he went first. I'd have to agree, and as I come from the independent side, so I will say I've seen all three. You have to inspect what you expect of people. So if it's in-house or it's independent, it has to have some guardrails around it. It's all about patient safety, no matter if it's an OEM or an independent or a in-house program. Know your regs, know your requirements. The federal government ensures that we should be doing this according to that manufacturer's procedure. Sorry, Ben Singh, but I need that manual to be able to do it appropriately. I too have a hard time getting down to saying, let's force rank this as to safe or not safe. Because I think we're all here for the end goal of patient safety. You just have to put some rigor around it.
Awesome, awesome. We're going to move on to the second question. We're going to allow 5 minutes per question to answer. And at the end, if you have questions, we're going to pass the mic around, and you can stand up, and we'll have that opportunity for you. The second question is, to fight against the right to repair laws, some manufacturers have repeatedly alleged that the release of diagnostic and repair information would violate their right to protect proprietary information. Do you agree or disagree with their argument, and why? And we'll start with Steve Vanderzee.
So good afternoon again. I would just say I think from the first question I'd fall into the same camp. I think we're all interested in the same outcome, and that's a safe outcome for whatever we do and whoever's doing that. When I kind of reflect on this question, I kind of look at it a little differently. So I don't think the manufacturers, my take is the manufacturers aren't necessarily against the right to repair for the purposes of minimizing or limiting access to tools, test equipment, whatever else to be successful in maintaining that. I think the angle I've seen is that they don't think it's necessary. If you think about the right to repair and the bills that I've seen at the state level, it's the resistance that I've sensed from manufacturers have been more about we don't need it there because we have something else. You know, we have the FDA, and we're working on a more federal level legislation or approach. And so I haven't seen it from that perspective as well, you know, from the manufacturers limiting access. We clearly all have that challenge depending on the manufacturer, whether they allow access to certain tools and training. And I don't know that they're tied directly together, though. I think the right to repair and the resistance that I've seen, at least in the state of Illinois, has been more about they don't think it's necessary to have medical equipment as part of that legislation, that there's other mechanisms to guide and regulate or oversee this topic. My organization, Advocate Aurora, has been educating our representatives on our feeling, and our position today is that we'd like to see a right to repair bill that would be inclusive of medical equipment, because we think it's the right thing for all organizations, whether it's a manufacturer, an independent, or an in-house program. So that's been our position, that we should leave, if there's going to be a bill or some legislation advanced, that we wouldn't want it excluded, because there is a concern that that's a slippery slope that we're going to start down by excluding that and proposing that there's some other area that might mandate or oversee that that could introduce other problems.
Great. Been saying you want to comment?
Yes. Well, strictly speaking, the answer to your question is that the maintenance information rarely contains anything that is proprietary. And if there is anything that is indeed proprietary, then the manufacturer would wisely protect it by using the so-called intellectual property law. And that's how you can really protect your information from other people getting that information and using that against you commercially, etc. Now, coming back, like what Steve said, yeah, I agree with Wayne that there is no generalization that you can say that one type of service organization is better than other by nature. Now, one thing we need to remember, however, is that we live in a very litigious society. By some strange coincidence, something like 95% plus of our congressmen representatives are all lawyers. Strange coincidence. And so what happens is that type of concern has driven a lot of organizations to do the right things to protect themselves, especially the ones who have resources to do so. So at the end of the day, it is likely the ones that have the resources not only to get the proper lawyers, etc., but also to establish the proper processes, policies, procedures, etc., to do the right things, so you don't depend on one single person at a time to do the right thing, because we all are human beings. We make mistakes. I'm sure about that, about myself. I don't know about you, but every morning when I look in the mirror to shave myself, I say, hey, I made a mistake. This is a huge mistake. I'm here still. So anyway, so I think we need to think about, in that context, what is really forcing us to think more seriously about safety. We all would like to have safety, but on the other hand, we all know that we are imperfect, and we need to have the proper, not just the regulations, but also the punishments that are needed to make sure that we do follow the right things. And also, at the end of the day, I think one thing that we have rarely talked about, and when we talk about the right to repair, we need to remember ourselves that we need to police our own profession. We cannot just let bad people do the bad things out there without telling somebody about it. We are all responsible for these kind of things. So please, if you see something, say something. Thank you.
Awesome. We have 4 more questions. So third question, another justification frequently used by some manufacturers in refusing to release maintenance information and sell replacement parts is because they're concerned that the lack of regulatory oversight of maintenance activities would increase their liability exposure in case third parties, including hospital-based CE departments, service actions results in patient harm. Do you agree or disagree with their justification, and why? Denise can start.
I knew you were going to pick on me for this one. I disagree. I have not. I mean, we internally at our organization audit our own programs. We also audit suppliers, whether they're independent suppliers or they're manufacturers. So we look at ourselves, hold ourselves accountable at the same caliber that we would expect from an OEM. Patient safety is a big part of what my team monitors as far as incidents and that sort of thing. And based on us repairing that equipment or PMing that equipment, I have not seen any proof or statistics to show that it's an increase of patient harm because it's an independent or an in-house program.
Great. Awesome. Steve Anders, you want to comment?
I would say the same thing. I would disagree. I think any good program, whether it's independent or in-house or even OEM, if you have the quality controls in place, these are things that you should be detecting and regulating. I would also say that, just to clarify the question a little bit in my mind, when we run up against, typically, when we run up against resistance to provide information or parts and service, we don't usually hear about, the concern about the legal ramifications. What we hear is that the concern about the quality, so our staff, our team touches these every single day, and so they have the competency to do the work. The concern is if we provide these parts or we provide this training, your team is only going to see this equipment a lot less frequent. And so what I hear frequently is more about the competency and the quality of the service, not as much that they don't want to give it to us, they just don't feel that we would be as competent, or develop that competency because the install base isn't the same as what their field service or their service solutions are. But it's less about, maybe there's a legal aspect to it in the background that I don't hear, but that's not what they lead with. Typically they lead with, it's, the concern about the quality of the service that would be provided.
Excellent. Fourth question, have you had experience with manufacturers refusing to provide either or both of the information below and reported these violations to FDA? Do you know what FDA did with the manufacturer? The assembly, installation, adjustment, and testing, information of diagnostic. I think the best person to answer would be either Denise or Steve.
I can go since my mic is live still,
yes.
Right? Okay, I'll take it.
Yes.
So I would say for our organization, we have not filed anything directly with the FDA related to this kind of this scenario or this situation. We have experience where manufacturers are refusing to provide the information, and it's a dialogue that we have with them and a negotiation. And I would say that we have the most success with our manufacturers when we're having that conversation at the time we're looking to acquire the asset versus when we're picking up the phone to call to see we need service. And so I would encourage all of us here, if you got a program and you're involved at all with the acquisition, that's where we need to start that dialogue about what kind of access to whatever information or training or tools are needed before we pull the trigger on writing the check for the equipment. That's really our time to negotiate and take advantage of that opportunity to make sure we're on the same page. We may still get to the same place at the end of the day where we won't have access to training because they don't have a training program or they don't provide the material, but at least we've had our opportunity to state our case and help on the supply chain decision-making process to make an informed decision and keep that dialogue going over time.
Great. I know you had gone to Springfield and you did some work behind the scene to help us with the Right to Repair Act. Can you talk maybe a minute or so about your experience, what you did there?
Yeah, so, I didn't go to Springfield, but I did have our government relations team, and I guess another recommendation I would have is if you don't know who your government relations representative is for your organization, please take the time to reach out to them and find out who they are. That's been a lesson learned for me. As I started getting more involved in the conversation around this topic several years ago, I started reaching out and trying to figure out who can I talk to on our leadership team, and I got plugged into our government relations. They're a wealth of information. They're the folks that are advocating on our behalf from a healthcare perspective. They're plugged into what's going on at the state and the federal level, and they need to be educated. This was a new topic, something that our government relations folks were unaware of. What happened was that there was a bill being advanced in the state of Illinois for a right to repair, and at the time the bill was being discussed to be put on the floor for a vote. At that time, they had removed the medical equipment category from that bill. And the concern was, again, if we're going to have a bill that's going to give us the right to repair, we'd like to have medical equipment on that as well. So fortunately, we were able to engage Senator Harris, who was the individual advancing that bill in the state, and get him on the phone and talk to him and educate him. Just talk about what our concerns are from a healthcare organization, what the history's been from our organization, what we do, and what our position was. So we really killed the bill, which in a sense was good for now, but it's not really a final resolution because the bill could be reintroduced down the road, and who knows where it's going to go with that. So we got to stay engaged. That's the bottom line. That's important, and that was the work that we did earlier this year.
Excellent. Been saying, I know that you've been in the industry for a while. Have you seen any frictions? We're going back to number 4th question. Have anybody approached you regarding the manufacturer not providing information that's need to be, or people have reported to FDA? What was your experience? Maybe you have come across stories or people approaching you. We need to do something. What can we do, been saying?
Okay, I don't have personal experience with the diagnostic X-ray equipment, but I had personal experience with some laser equipment. As you folks probably know, lasers is one of the equipment that CMS has told us that we have to follow manufacturer's recommendations, period, right? And so when that came out several years ago, I approached the respective manufacturers for the service manuals, and actually the FDA has on its regulation a specific requirement for them to release that information, and a couple of them refused to provide that information. And so I had to send the correspondence that I had with them to the FDA's. FDA has a allegations of regulatory misconduct branch. Funny name, but that's where the thing went. I did not, unfortunately, had a chance to follow up with them because the FDA told me that they will not respond directly to me. They will investigate the allegation. And then if I wanted to find out what happened, I would have to file a Freedom of Information Act release and after they finalized the case. But at that time, I had left the company that I was working for, so I could not really get to the bottom of it. But indeed, FDA has that regulation, and has the obligation to follow up, at least with medical lasers.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next question, number 5. Please compare the challenges in servicing medical equipment you and your staff face today and compare it to how it was done 10 years ago with the rapid incorporation of software for both operating the equipment and diagnosing equipment failures. A, significantly more challenges. B, little more challenges. C, no difference. D, fewer challenges. E, much fewer challenges. Wayne Moore, you want to get started, and I'll ask a few other people.
Well, we don't really service medical equipment outside of diagnostic ultrasound probes. So there's no, I mean, this doesn't make sense.
Maybe Denise can begin.
More challenges.
More challenges, okay.
I think I hear more of those in the industry 20, 30 years. They've always serviced the equipment. They've learned on the job. And the challenge today is it's not just learn on the job. Competencies come into place. Our surveys, you're asked for competencies and how can you demonstrate that you've been trained appropriately to safely repair or preventive maintenance this device. Getting manuals to follow the procedures per accreditation and regulations. You have to follow that, and without the manual, then we're scrutinized from an in-house or an independent as to how you're servicing that equipment. So those in itself provide more challenges for us in the industry to maintain that device without scrutiny.
Steve, what about you, 10 years ago and now?
So it's definitely been a lot more challenging. I'd say there's kind of two areas where it's been challenging for our organization. On the capital side, we see a much shorter life cycle of equipment because it is software-based, and with software-based applications, you tend to be more aligned with Microsoft's end of life versus what we may have been used to of end of life in your traditional medical equipment, which would be 10 to 15 years. So now we're on a much shorter technology cycle, so that's driving the need to replace equipment a lot sooner than what we've historically done, and it's putting extreme pressure on our organization on capital capacity. I'd say the same is true on the operations side, where if you don't have access to the material, there's a skill set too that we don't all have. A lot of us have been in the industry a lot longer and aren't used to working with a software-based application as much as you are a hardware. So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve in getting our more seasoned team up to competency levels for working in that type of an environment, a software-based environment, and networked or integrated environment. It's very different. I think those are the two main challenges, kind of the operational side and then on the capital side.
Excellent. This will be our last questions, and then the next 15 minutes we're going to open to the floor. And Jose is standing in the back with the mic. If you're interested in asking a question, Jose Nunes will come and give you the mic, and each of you will have an opportunity to speak. So the last question for us here, for the panel, comparing 3 industry segments, manufacturers, in-house CE teams, and external third parties. Please provide a score 1 to 10, and 10 being the highest, based on your experience with them for each of them in the following aspects. A, safety. B, prompt response. C, timely repair, low downtime. D, customer, clinician satisfaction. E, cost. If you want to volunteer to go first, that's fine too. Any one of us.
I'll start.
Okay.
This is a tricky question. There's lots of correct answers, right?
Yes.
So I think just if you look at these categories and kind of reflect back on the question, first of all, I'd like to just say I want to get past the in-house versus OEM versus independent. We're all HTM, right? We're all healthcare technology management. Regardless of who's paying us at the end of the day, we're all looking for the same goal. I think depending on what your model is, your service model is, whether it's a field service solution or a hospital-based solution or a third-party solution, all these could be rated very differently. So when I look at certain things like customer satisfaction, I would say that where you have hospital-based programs, we should be knocking it out of the park on customer satisfaction. We're present. We're there every day. We're rounding. Much more difficult for a manufacturer to do that because they don't have the team to be there every day. They have limited opportunities to be engaged with the customer. They sell the product and maybe they're called in for service. So it's a more challenging. Not that it can't be just as successful, but I would say that if you looked at a hospital-based to manufacturer, I would say we have an upper hand just because we're present. I would say the same thing for timely repair. Again, if you're proximal and you're on site, you're going to have an advantage, and that's one of the things that we pitch a lot when we talk about the relationships we want to have with our manufacturers. How do we augment that team, supplement that team, since we are on site and we can respond quickly, but at the same time we need the expertise of that manufacturer to help supplement us as well. And I think because you're close to the product, you should be able to really be knocking it out of the ballpark. Prompt response, I'd say that could be evenly distributed across whoever it is. I mean, it's all about managing expectations in that respect, I think. So if you set that up in front to be successful, you should be okay. And then safety, I think it's universal. I mean, I don't know that, again, none of us want anything but, the best, highest quality, safest solution.
Absolutely. Anyone else from the panel that want to comment? Or
just parenthetically, I agree with everything you said, Steve. The other thing for consideration is the complexity of the equipment and how that would factor into it. We kind of throw around medical equipment really loosely here, and the bandwidth of complexity, as you guys know, is huge. So you may find somebody with an MRI machine that won't let anybody near it but the OEM. I mean, they have armed guards around it 24. So it really depends on that as well, and trying to force that complexity into these kind of categories. Very, very difficult to do.
Excellent. What my take is on it, I really believe that we're number one goal focus is patient safety. And it's really not about them versus us. We as a whole HTM together have a responsibility in moving forward and working together as a team for the cause of patient. If the patient is on the table, that could be my family. I see it. That could be my mom or dad that will be using that equipment, and I pay attention to those, my responsibility as that. So thank you so much for our panel. Can we give them a round of applause for doing such an amazing job? Thank you. So at this moment, we have 15 minutes. We're going to go to the floor now. We ask that you keep your question limited to a minute or less. We want to strike as many questions. So we have Gary.
A minute or less.
If you want to ask a question, raise your hands. We'll come to you.
Thank you. So I think I'm addressing this to me. The argument is often stated that the system's not broke. We don't see examples of serious safety events occurring necessarily due to equipment maintenance. How do you respond to that? Because that is a very common argument against limiting right to repair for some of the independents and in-house providers.
It's a good question. It's one that, as you rightly point out, comes up frequently at the meetings we've had with the FDA and with others throughout the course of the last 2.5 years the service docket's been going on. The answer to that is you don't know what you don't know. And if events are not going unreported, then it's really hard to accumulate data that shows that there's a problem. And so, without regulatory compliance, it's very difficult to get somebody to volunteer to submit a medical device report and say, yeah, I messed up and killed that guy, sorry about that. You just don't get that many people volunteering that kind of data. And it really doesn't capture the entire issue at hand. When we think of safety, we shouldn't think of, well, it didn't kill anybody, therefore it's safe. That's really kind of a low bar. And so what other things are going on where the service should be brought to the attention of a regulatory agency where the patient, for example, is escalated to a more invasive process or procedure to get the clinical data when it could have been derived from a non-invasive technique if the machine and stuff had been working correctly. So safety's got to be a bigger bubble than what we have historically looked at with the medical device repair report. So,
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
I guess I'd like to challenge that just a little bit. So the idea that we don't know what we don't know, I think that's where one of our challenges is today. And it's been, in my opinion, I think it's been a little distracting to what we're ultimately trying to achieve here. But I know from the organization I currently work for and others that I have worked for in the past, we do know. We have a ton of data. And there is, and again, it was the challenge that I think Ben Sang brought to the front of the crowd at the beginning, was that if you have a quality program, you are tracking these types of events, these adverse events. And we do root cause analysis when we have serious safety events occur. We do them when we have near misses. And so there's a very deliberate process in place when we have bad outcomes, whether it be a delay in care all the way to a serious safety event. And we're involved, our team is involved as part of that evaluation. And if it would ever come to this, it's never, thankfully, in my experience, come to this where it was an equipment-related issue due to lapse in service or inappropriate service, we would absolutely have reported that. I mean, that's part of the Safe Medical Device Act. I mean, we are responsible as an industry to be making sure we're doing that. It just isn't been the case. I mean, we haven't, at least in the organizations I've been involved with, we've not had, again, thankfully, we haven't had those situations. But I think that's where maybe one of the disconnects may be, is that maybe not all programs do that. And I know Joint Commission and DMV has brought that to us a number of times, saying, we get it, you guys do this, you show that you do this, but we're not convinced every single HTM program out there is doing it the same way as Advocate is doing it, or Intermountain Health, or you name the facility. And so I think that's part of the problem, is we got to have that more dialogue around that, because I think we're not necessarily aligned yet on what we know.
All right, we're doing really well on time. We have another 10 more minutes. You want to raise your hands, we'll come get to you. Yes, all the way in the back, Jose.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin McMillan from Steris Instrument Management Services. My question is, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the following. Many times, healthcare organizations choose a third party for reducing costs. And what would the impact to your organization be if that shifted and the primary focus was to increase the support of a wide range of surgical devices to a higher degree than what the OEM provides? And I would define support as providing subject matter experts that perform routine PMs, and to also provide robust data analytics that tracks costs and trending analysis and leads to targeted education, training, and competencies for both end users and clinical engineering, with the primary focus on patient safety. What impact could that have on healthcare organizations?
So, Kevin, if I can just restate the question. So, is the main question the impact? So, if as a healthcare organization, the option of going with a third party or alternative service solution versus the manufacturer's service solution?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's actually one of the reasons why we're very hypersensitive to any additional regulation or regulatory activities around allowing companies like Steris IMS and others to be able to provide a similar or sometimes better service than what we could have gotten from the OEM. And the reason why I say better is that in some instances, as I mentioned earlier, the life cycle on equipment is much shorter. The OEMs are not necessarily supporting my entire fleet of equipment. So I'm looking for alternatives because I can't get it from the OEM on the second or third generation. So we're looking outside of that manufacturer for that kind of service. We've done some of our own internal analysis in limiting the access to other service solutions, whether it's because we've got legacy systems that aren't supported by the OEM, or we've found that the same quality of services provided by an alternative service provider at a much lower cost, limiting that can have a significant outcome on our cost of service ratio that we track as an organization. I've just done a little bit of math, for our organization. We're tracking around 3.5% on a cost of service ratio for our organization. Just a 0.5 increase, a 0.5% increase is millions of dollars a year to our cost. So we're very sensitive to that, and that's why we want to ensure that whatever we advance, whether it's regulatory or some other guideline, policy, whatever it is that gets advanced, that it doesn't hinder access to these other alternatives.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it, and I apologize for the long question.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, been saying?
Yeah, I think we need to be clear that the fact that something is more expensive is not necessarily better. Give you one concrete example. I don't have the detailed numbers in front of me right now, but a study that was done by several years ago by the Commonwealth Fund, and more recently also by some researchers, and this is, I think, public knowledge already, is that the United States is by far the country that spends the most on healthcare, something like in the order of 15% of the GDP, and we have one of the worst health outcomes of all the OECD countries. So we spend the most, and yet we don't get the best. So it's not spending more that we are going to solve the problems. Actually, we are wasting a lot of money on things that are unnecessary. And now, it's not necessarily because OEM is always more expensive. As Steve said, we always have to consider which one is the best solution for that particular situation. Because if you are located in the middle of Montana, maybe you want to have a stronger local presence. Doesn't matter whether it's in-house or third-party, because in the middle of the winter, you are not going to get any support from anybody that is a little too far away. Now, on the other hand, if you are in the metropolitan area, things can be quite different. So we really need to stop thinking about, hey, by spending more, we can get better results. No, let's try to do what is truly necessary, and that's why, in spite of all the things that we accuse the CMS of, they finally woke up and said, okay, you guys can do AEM. Why? Because they realized that we have data to prove that by not following strictly the manufacturer recommendations, we can achieve the same or, if not, better results. And actually, as we all know, although many manufacturers will not willing to admit that their own representatives don't follow their own recommendations. Okay? So we really need to think more carefully what is really necessary. We cannot continue to do the same and expect better results. I think somebody attributed that to Einstein, but I don't think that's really a correct attribution. But the bottom line here is that we need to find ways to spend less money in healthcare and achieve better results. And safety obviously is the paramount parameter here, but that's not the only parameter.
All right. So we have one more question, and we'll answer it in 3 minutes. Anyone else? One more question. As you know, we have one more session left. It's from 1:45 to 3:30. Don't leave right after this. We have more sessions on the way, educational sessions. One more question. Yeah, Elmer, ready? What was it? And we'll try to answer in 3 minutes, and we'll wrap it up. We'll move forward to our educational session.
Thank you. And yes, I'm always precise and to the point, as you know. So, and it will be under 3 minutes for sure. So, Mike, this may be a question, but also it may be hopefully not perceived as a statement. But one, I want to give great thanks to this panel and giving their insight to this group today. I heard some great things I think that need to be echoed on upon here. If you see something, say something. That to me is so important in HTM. I've been in this industry over 33 years. Seen a lot in-house. I've seen a lot in many settings, and I can't put enough around that. So see something, say something. Don't be afraid to look into something either, just because a budget does not support it. And remember that. 2, the other piece is we're in some exciting times right now as an industry. This accreditation or credentialing or whatever's going to come out of it is only going to strengthen HTM. It's going to strengthen the chain that needs to be strengthened. It will probably remove some groups that may not fit in there, but at the end of the day, the 3 playing fields that Steve spoke to are one in HTM: OEM, alternative provider, and in-house groups. There isn't a we versus them. It's us. So, not a question, not a personal statement, but since you gave me the microphone for the last one, I'll finish there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate. I see a lot of energy. First day of conference, a lot of excitement, a lot of great turnout. Thank you for the expert panels for being here, taking the time, PTO, and being in Chicago. Can you give them a round of applause? And let's have you stand up. The photographer wants to take a picture. Let's have you stand up. We're going to take a picture.